One of the ways that we grow in our faith as followers of Christ is through the discipline of fasting. So let's explore that today. What is fasting? Tell us a little bit about what it means.
Fasting is when we deprive ourselves of food and sometimes water, sometimes one or the other, something like that. And it's a time that we stop focusing on those things that we like doing very much and deprive ourselves of it so we can focus solely on God.
Okay, so that's really not something that seems very common today.
No, it's not. And I think one of the reasons for that is if we look at through the history of the church especially, there's been times where it has not been practiced in a right way, with wrong motives and wrong ideas of what it means to do that.
Right.
And so I think we as an evangelical church sometimes have swung the pendulum too far the other way. And since some people and groups have abused it, we're going to just
ignore it. Right. So yeah, that's true. But it's possible. I mean, first of all, let's back up and say this is a biblical idea, though. And so, we ought to figure out how to do it biblically. What are some biblical precedents?
Well, Jesus, he's when he talks about fasting in the Sermon on the Mount, he said, he didn't say if you fast. He said when you fast.
Assuming that it was going to happen.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. And so what are some of the biblical reasons why people fasted? Can you think of some examples of what people were doing and why?
Yeah, well, there's examples of a regular fast just to focus on God. Things might be going well. They might times of prosperity. You're just so blessed, and you want to just not get intoxicated with those blessings and say, I need to take a break and just focus on God. That's one reason.
Right.
Then there's other times, maybe in a time of crisis. Maybe if you look at biblically, maybe there was a famine or something like that, and they had plenty, but they just said, God, we want to seek your face and ask you to intervene during this time. Or maybe a family situation. David had a family situation, and it was just a crisis in his life and in his family, and he decided he was going to fast.
Yeah, that's a great example. There's a lot of illustrations of special need. People would fast in special need to seek God, but also as a regular habit, just as a part of the framework of their life. That's a great illustration. So we might. So if we decide to fast, if somebody's going to take this up, what kind of some practical advice on how long should they do it? I mean, what are some ways, some things to consider in practical terms?
So if we look at scriptural examples of fasting, every time somebody did it, it was for 40 days. No, just kidding. There were times that they fasted just from food. Sometimes they fasted from food and water. Sometimes they fasted, and sometimes they did it for 40 days, which is an extreme example.
Very extreme, yeah.
And then sometimes it was for a day. Sometimes it was for one meal. I mean, the examples are just all over the map.
All right, great.
And practically speaking, maybe if you're doing it for a crisis, once the crisis is done, there's no need to fast.
Right, exactly.
Or if you're sometimes before big decisions. You made the decision, okay.
So now you're done, right? So that's really helpful. So that's great because it gives us a certain amount of freedom, and that helps it not to be just keeping rules or become really legalistic in that regard. Yeah. So we talked about times of crisis, times of blessing to get our perspective, and you just mentioned facing a decision, times of guidance. And maybe when we feel like we have a real need for God's power in our life, maybe to overcome sin, or what are some other ideas you have?
Yeah, and like Jesus said one time, when there was a certain situation, he says, sometimes we need the extra power of God to overcome an addiction or for demonic possession or something like that. If you're going to approach something like that, it's good to go in it prepared. Now, and one thing I want us to understand on this is that the power of God is everywhere. It's available to everybody at any time. And I like to look at it like the sun. The sun's power is available to everybody at every time, at all times.
Yeah.
But when you take a magnifying glass, you can focus the energy of that sun into a particular situation. And that's why, there's nothing magical about fasting. When people fast, they think, I'm going to hear God's voice clearer than ever before, or something miraculous has to happen because God, you have to, I'm fasting. It's not like that. But it is like the sun in the sense of God's power is already there, and fasting sometimes helps us concentrate
Right, exactly.
on the power of God and concentrate on God himself for a particular reason or situation.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a really good point. Now, you mentioned sometimes people have the wrong expectations about fasting. What are some other pitfalls, some wrong reasons to fast, or some things that we maybe assume that we shouldn't assume?
Yeah, like, well, I'm fasting, so when I'm praying, and I've been fasting for maybe a couple days or something, so obviously I'm going to hear the clear, audible voice of God speak because I'm sacrificing so much.
Right.
No, it's just don't have wrong expectations. Just say, God, I want to have a time of focus on you, and whatever I get out of it is going to happen. I don't have any certain expectations here.
There may not be a miracle. There may not be something, whatever I'm expecting to happen, a breakthrough or something in some issue in my life.
Yeah.
It may or may not happen. But the point is that I'm in a closer and deeper relationship with God in the middle of that situation.
And on that same note, we might be in a particular conflict or something, addiction, battling with a stronghold or something. Sometimes conflict even gets more during the time of fasting, like Jesus. I mean, he fasted for 40 days and 40
and
nights.
that's when
what
the
happened?
devil came.
The devil came. And I don't know your experience, but my experience during fasting at times in my life, it's like, oh my gosh, why am I doing this? I'm self-exposing myself in a way that has never been done before, and I'm not liking this,
Right, exactly.
But after I look back on the situation, it was a good thing to do.
Yeah, good point. So we just want to encourage you to consider this. Again, it's not happening very often in American Christian culture today, and that's our loss, really. And so we want to encourage you that fasting can really be something, if you go about it the right attitude, the right heart, can really be something that God can use in your life to help you grow in your relationship with Him.